Good evening. Welcome to the September 17th edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. For those that are in attendance tonight, there are copies of our agenda available on either side of the room. For those watching at home, if you go to downers.us, our website, in the lower left-hand corner will be a link to this week's meetings where all those same materials will appear, and you can have access to them there. Let's start tonight by rising together and saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
April, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Gray.
Here.
Commissioner Colavani.
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Cubic.
Here.
Commissioner Wallace.
Here.
Commissioner Earl.
Here.
Commissioner Jose.
Here.
Mayor Barnett.
Here. Thank you. Tonight's meeting, like all meetings, will have several opportunities for public comment. There'll be a section shortly on agenda items which are not on tonight's agenda, and then as we go through the agenda, we'll entertain additional public comment on each of those items. Before we go much further, we need a motion to approve minutes of previous council meetings.
Mayor Barnett, I move that the council adopt the minutes as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, that's unanimous. First round of public comments is on us just like that. This is the portion of our meeting where we entertain comments or questions from the public on any items not on tonight's agenda. So if you have items that you want to just bring to our attention, we weren't planning on talking about tonight, please come up to the podium and give us your name and tell us what's on your mind. Okay, we'll move on to our agenda then. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mayor Barnett, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda passes unanimously. It takes us to our active agenda. We have a couple items on our active agenda tonight. In this portion of our meeting, we'll entertain audience questions after we introduce an item. Allows the council to hear from folks before we take any action, and then we'll have some council discussion, and then we'll take action. So are there any motions tonight on the active agenda?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance repealing section 15.33 of the Downers Grove Municipal Code as presented.
Second.
Anyone from the public want to comment on section 1533 of the Downers Grove Municipal Code? Okay, any council questions or comments? April, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose.
Aye.
Commissioner Earl.
Aye.
Commissioner Gray.
Aye.
Commissioner Colavani.
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Cubic.
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace.
Aye.
Mayor Barnett.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Is there a motion for ordinance 2019-8295?
Mayor Barnett, I move that the council adopt an ordinance approving a redevelopment agreement between the Village of Downers Grove and Downers Grove Township as presented.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions from the public concerning an ordinance to approve a redevelopment agreement with Downers Grove Township?
I'm Mark Toman, the Downers Grove Township Supervisor. Don't have a big speech again like last week. I just wanted to thank you for your consideration and for the intergovernmental agreement and redevelopment agreement. That'll make a great project, cooperating with several non-for-profits and also with Downers Grove North High School possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any other comments from the audience? Council, questions or comments on this one? Anyone? I just want to say that, first of all, I appreciate the township coming and looking for an opportunity to work with us. We do look for those same opportunities. This is an opportunity to partner with another government body, which I think everybody benefits from. And we're going to get some improvements that the village is constantly chasing as well, some stormwater system and pedestrian sidewalk access improvements as well. So it's really, truly a win-win, and I'm looking forward to getting started on the project. April, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose.
Aye.
Commissioner Earl.
Aye.
Commissioner Gray.
Aye.
Commissioner Colavani.
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Cubic.
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace.
Aye.
Mayor Barnett.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. This takes us now to our first reading section of our meeting. The first reading is a little bit more like a workshop. These are items which we will be discussing tonight but not taking any action on this evening. In this case, as we go through the agenda, we will talk about the subject amongst ourselves and the council first, and then we'll solicit input from the audience. So with that, Dave?
Thank
lead us
you,
down the
Mayor
road.
Barnett. There are 6 items on tonight's first reading agenda, really in 4 topics for tonight. We'll start with consideration of an ordinance authorizing a special use for properties located at 63rd and Woodward regarding an animal boarding facility Here with background information on this petition is our Community Development Director, Stan Popovich.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. As Manager Fieldman noted, the petition is a special use request for an animal boarding facility at 2149 through 2153 63rd Street. It's within the Meadowbrook Shopping Center at 63rd and Woodward. This is an outline of the shopping center as a whole. We're considering the special use here on the far western side along Belmont Road there in the blue outline here. The petition is proposing a full-service training, grooming, daycare, and boarding business for dogs. It's the boarding that requires the special use for the overnight stays. As part of the request, the petitioner will also be having a little bit of an outdoor area on the west side there for dogs to be outside a little bit. And the property owner has agreed to other improvements in front of the shopping center as well, in front of this location. They have repaired the fascia and a few of the columns in the front. That was in the staff report, and that's already been completed. And then upon approval, they would be getting a permit to mill and grind and resurface this parking lot area in blue, and then also add landscape islands with some trees in these areas in green there as well. Those improvements are all taking place in front of the business itself there on the west side of the shopping center there. The comprehensive plan notes that the shopping center should be a mixed-use development, a mix of land uses within contiguous geographic boundaries. It does note that this site is a catalytic site in the comprehensive plan. This improvement and special use request does trigger improvements in front of the space as well and some on the facade. The Plan Commission reviewed the case at their August 5th meeting and found that the standards of approval were met. If there's any questions I can answer for you at this time, Mayor and Council, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you, Stan. Any questions or comments from the council? None? I just had a couple that really have to do with special use. So this entire parcel, Meadowbrook, is it's kind of an eyesore, up and down. And so as it relates to our special use process and things like the islands, for instance, and the fascia work, do we have any ability to compel, frankly, just larger, higher quality improvements in those kinds of areas? You don't have to necessarily answer this tonight. Some commentary from planning staff and Enza's crew later, but this is a part of town that struggles, and I think every one of us up here has heard about it over and over and over again. So I'd be interested in what opportunities we might have along those lines.
We will look into that and get back to you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience or comments from the audience on this item? Okay, thank you, Stan.
Thank you, Mayor. The next item, item B on our agenda, is consideration and action on a report regarding Human Service Ad Hoc Committee report. Those in the council may recall that the Human Service Ad Hoc Committee was created in December of 2018, and this 7-member committee was presented with 2 questions by the Village Council. Number 1, what role should the appointed Human Service Commission serve in the village? And number 2, what should the Human Service Commission do to assist the village in promoting its function and mission? This ad hoc group met from January through June of this year and produced a high-quality report that is in your agenda packet. Was previously officially transmitted to the council, I believe, last month, and I know the council members have had it in their possession for several months. I was a staff liaison with this group, and I really enjoyed working with them throughout that time. Very impressive group of dedicated professionals and volunteers. We have identified 2 options for the council, certainly not all the options, but 2 options on the table as far as next steps. Option 1 would be simply to accept the Human Service Ad Hoc Committee report as presented. Option 2 would actually reconstitute this same group and direct them to build on the work they've already done for us, specifically to develop more specific recommendations on the actions that are in the report already, and to prioritize those recommendations into some level of prioritization that we could turn more into a work plan. Second part of this would be to have the Human Service Ad Hoc Committee consider presentations by not only village departments like the police and fire department, but Downers Grove Township, departments in DuPage County, and other not-for-profit organizations which currently provide human services to portions of our community throughout our village and just beyond our borders as well. And in pursuing this option, the council could direct them to basically repeat the same pattern we had last time around, which would be start the work in January and hope to have it completed by mid-year. Happy to answer any questions the council may have about this report.
Thank you, Dave. Council colleagues, questions, comments? Need to find a little course of direction here. Leslie?
Yeah, first I would just like to thank the ad hoc committee for the excellent work that you were able to get done in 6 months. I can say that I'm definitely in favor of the latter option of kind of reconvening the ad hoc committee so that we can do almost more like a longer-term planning process to see, so we can evaluate what it is that's already being done. Again, those organizations and nonprofits and other governmental organizations that are already doing some work, so that we can really get some strategic priorities and focus, so we can use our manpower to the best of their ability and in the most efficient way possible. So I'm in favor of reconvening that ad hoc committee and then eventually establishing a more long-term committee once we get some of those focus areas nailed down.
Thank you. Others? Wayne, Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree on option 2. They've done a lot of great work already, and they should be commended for it. But there are a lot of things going on behind the scenes in the village. I'm thinking in particular with the police department, the fire department, that folks just may not be aware of on a day-to-day basis, and that it's entirely possible all of us are not aware of it on a day-to-day basis. And that's not to mention the other various resources and organizations that are out there. So the only way to really leverage them appropriately is to ask the ad hoc committee to do a little more work. And I think they've demonstrated that they've got that capability of doing very good work, and I look forward to the additional detail and the prioritization that they can give us. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in? Rich?
Yeah, I wanted to agree with my colleagues. I think it was a good piece of work. You could definitely tell that your heart was in it. You know, there are areas in the village where the least among us, or the people who are most vulnerable, need help. And there's this kind of matrix or maze of services that are out there, some by the township. For instance, we just learned about a food pantry that we approved. And if we didn't know that they had a food pantry, maybe we would have set out to say, hey, Downers Grove should do that. So there's a lot of services available at the county. There are the non-for-profits as well. So it'd be great if this group could drill down, find out what those resources are available, figure out where the holes are, figure out where we need to plug those holes, and use the same good efforts moving forward so we can start making some decisions. And thank you for your work.
Thanks, Rich. Nicole?
Yeah, thank you. At the risk of sounding repetitive, I'm going to try and keep my comments short, but I just really want to say thank you so much to this committee. Their report is so incredibly thorough and well thought out. This is something that is and has been important to me, and so reconstituting, I'm hoping that they're all willing to get back together for another 6 months and really hone in on some of these things. I think the goal of this initially was to prioritize all of these many things and all of these ideas so that should we again have an active Human Services Commission, because one technically still exists, there's just no one on it. Should we have an active Human Services Commission again, they have exactly where they have a starting place, right? They have a mission and they have things that they can start with. So that's the goal. So I'm absolutely in favor of reconstituting the ad hoc, and I'm really hoping that everyone is willing to serve again. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mark?
Thank you to everyone who did all of this hard work. I always appreciate our volunteers, and this one was awful quick, probably not enough time for everybody to drill down and get to some of the stuff that other places are doing that we don't maybe need to do again. So I think that option 2 would be the best way to go. I really think if these guys are willing to do a little bit more work, thank you so much to them for the work you've done and hopefully the work you're willing to do in the future. And I think it's a great idea to sit down with some of the other entities of government and not-for-profits that do the good work in our community as well, and have them get together and discuss where maybe we should be focused. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Kevin?
Just wanted to kind of thank everyone that worked on this. Lots of good information, not to repeat a lot of the same things. I am in support of option 2, and the only thing that I saw that came out of that for me was really wanting to see where the overlap in some of the services would be, and also maybe a drill down, defining a little bit more how the resource could be used more of a niche, kind of leveraging or stopgap in some of those areas where service doesn't exist.
Thank you, Kevin. I agree with my colleagues. I won't repeat them. I will add that one of the things that was referred to several times in the report had to do with gaps, and identifying those gaps is certainly important, but also, unless we really understand what those gaps are, the ability to act in a meaningful way with a resource allocation, whether it's people or revenue or partnerships, becomes kind of impossible. And so as a focusing effort to try and really get us pointed the right way, I think that'd be a great next step. Is there anybody from the audience that would like to weigh in on this? Please.
Good evening, Mary Blanchard. I like hearing all the positive comments, but I'm still going to say what I want to say for the record. Whether it's a household, business, country, or our village, leadership sets the tone, and that tone and mindset works its way through the culture of the community. For too many years, the singular focus of the council has been on the economics of our village, and this has created an imbalance, one where the dollars are discussed, but not the people to whom the dollars apply. Like any community, we have disparity. Please consider the demographics and those that are in need in our community. Consider those that are in the minority or on the sidelines. At a minimum, having the committee in place will change the conversation and shift how village staff and the council consider the mission, services, and community support. At its very best, it can change the lives of individuals and show an inclusiveness that is necessary if we are to be a community of neighbors that watch out for one another. In addition to reinstating the committee, we ask that you please provide funding so there is a true collective impact. Please decide to set a different tone, one where all that live and work in our community know that they belong and have a place, a home that accepts who they are no matter what. Because so much time has passed where this has not been a priority, there's a lot of work to do, so we need to get started. Please don't delay in bringing the human connection back to our village. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Anyone else want to weigh in on this one? Any additional comments from council? Okay, thank you. Moving on.
Thank you, Mayor. The next item on our agenda is consideration of an ordinance prohibiting adult-use cannabis business establishments. At last week's meeting, the Village Council approved the motion to direct staff to prepare an ordinance prohibiting adult-use cannabis business establishments from operating within the boundaries of the Village of Downers Grove. Please note that that does not change our rules and regulations on medical cannabis centers. Staff did draft an ordinance based on that direction. That ordinance is in your packet this evening, and we're happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Thank you, Dave. Council colleagues, jump in, comment on this. Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank staff for the great job they've done presenting this issue week after week in a balanced manner. Unfortunately, the decision-making process this council has engaged in thus far has been nothing short of deplorable. 2 weeks ago, this council gave clear feedback to continue with a public engagement process that may have resulted in zoning for cannabis-related businesses. A clear and unmistakable majority of emails I received after that supported this effort. And I'd like to point out that they were all sent to the mayor and council address, so unless there's a technological glitch somewhere, my colleagues received them as well. And I want to thank everyone who contacted us, whether you're pro or con on this particular issue. 7 days later, without any new information and without even a heads up to other council members, 2 council members changed their votes and the majority directed staff to prepare the ordinance that staff just introduced. The arguments in favor of opting out are largely, if not entirely, related to a dislike for legalization, possession, and use of cannabis. They are entirely unrelated to zoning concerns. The arguments for opting out are equally applicable to, say, alcohol. The village creates designer liquor licenses and zones for liquor stores and restaurants that serve alcohol all the time. Just this month, the council removed restrictions that were previously imposed on certain liquor license holders. Yet we have heard no zoning-related argument as to why cannabis should be treated any differently than alcohol, and I've seen no evidence that cannabis is more dangerous than alcohol. The financial opportunity lost on this is manifest. By moving forward with this ordinance, the council is willingly giving up sales tax revenue equivalent to an Art Van furniture store or a car dealer on Ogden Avenue. Surrounding towns are moving to approve zoning for cannabis-based businesses, including Lombard, Darien, and Westmont. One or more of these towns will take in the sales tax revenue that Downers Grove is willingly pushing away. Remember this the next time someone in the majority bemoans a lack of revenue. Certain folks are suggesting that a plan commission hearing would not have been valuable because the plan commission cannot vote to prohibit sales. That much is true. But prior to serving on this council, I served as chair of the plan commission, and the plan commission would have taken input on zoning setbacks, the impact on surrounding areas and businesses, possible special uses that could mitigate potential negative impacts, and perhaps even brought out a business interested in opening in this area. All of this and more would have added value to the community discussion that is taking place, even if the majority ended up right back here in this position. This council majority denied that opportunity. It's also been suggested that only a handful of residents have given feedback at our meetings, but that entirely discounts the opinions of those who have written in. Ultimately, the reason that this council majority supports the ordinance that is requested isn't zoning related at all. It's in opposition to the state's legalization of cannabis. The arguments presented are based on emotion, fear, and anecdote, rather than rational evidence. I fundamentally oppose the ordinance and the opaque, irrational decision-making used to enact it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Greg. Others want to weigh in? Leslie?
Yep. I don't want to repeat what Commissioner Jose said. I agree with all of that, but I also want to point out that by stopping this process now, we are also stopping our ability to vet quality and peer-reviewed research. I really want to point out that not all research is created equal. As someone who has published peer-reviewed science literature, that there is a very specific process that something needs to go through when you publish a scientific article and when you have quality data. Quality data does not start with a business whose mission statement and vision statements within it have that they want to talk about the harm done by marijuana. You're automatically starting at a bias when you are using that type of information. And there have been resources from those types of organizations that have been floated around. I want to make sure as we're going through this process that the evidence and the data that we are using has been vetted and is done from a point of we're going to assume we know nothing about this, and now we are going to conduct a quality research study to figure it out. And there are some of those that are available about cannabis. Because it is a Schedule I drug, you cannot use federal dollars to research it. However, you can use state dollars, and you can also use outside organizations from outside this country. So there have been funders who have funded quality peer-reviewed research studies about cannabis to dispel some of the myths and some of the fear. I also want to point out that any specific data about whether it be crime or with zoning businesses or youth use, it's important to, again, to note where your source is coming from. It's very easy to compare two sets of years and say, in 2005, this was the percent youth use, and in 2015, this was what it was. Well, 2005 just happened to be one of the lowest years ever in record, and 2015 was right after the legalization, say, in Colorado. It's a much different story when you actually look at the trend over the past 20 to 25 years. Those are the types of things that we were not able to analyze and that we will not be able to vet if we choose to prohibit. I am against making decisions on faulty data or on data that has not been vetted by experts. So that is another reason that I think that we should not continue to prohibit this, that we should have more time to vet these resources. And when it's in the Plan Commission's hands, we absolutely have that time to be able to do that. If we choose to vote on this now, we are limiting our resources, and we will not be able to get that information in our hands. So I am also very opposed to prohibiting the zoning right off the bat. I think it is in the best interest of everyone in this community if we do all of the quality research that we can, regardless of whether or not we zone. Being armed with more quality information is always in the best interest of this community. Thanks.
Thank you, Leslie. Anyone else want to jump in? Kavanaugh?
Yeah, can I'd like to comment on this issue. Going back the last few weeks, I want to bring up one of the topics that was thrown out regarding why we should move forward. And it's centered around this idea of stopping information. I heard that repeated a lot. And what I wanted to do was point out our timeline in this process as it relates to the information surrounding this issue. The Village of Downers Grove on 8/16 released data to the public at large for public consumption and put it in public domain. This document that a lot of us have, if you haven't seen it, it is pretty much the zoning of cannabis business. That went out on 8/16 of this past month. What has transpired in the last few weeks, looks like we had a first reading, kind of a general discussion on this issue on 8/20. The Director of Community Development and the Chief of Police spoke regarding this same document that was released again on 8/16 on that day, and we kind of discussed it at that point. And then just last week, an ordinance was, two ordinances were presented. That's a brief timeline, but one of the things I wanted to point out about this document that has been in the public domain for the past month, particularly kind of relates to the 30-plus resources that were included as information with this topic. So we're saying that a vote against is stopping information, yet we have 30 resources from everything covering Illinois Adult Cannabis Summary to statistics, Oregon Marijuana Tax Return Monthly. There are 30 resources that have been available for more than a month, yet we're talking about a stop or slowing or a kind of a hindrance in the flow of information. I'm not sure I agree with that. Let's see, I had some other notes. 3 things that stood out as I've kind of processed. I have brought with me again the same sheet that has traveled the last 3 weeks as to the notes and points that I've made regarding this issue, and I have said over the past week that I'm willing to have sit-down conversations on this information. But here's one of the questions that jumped out from looking at this timeline earlier. I asked myself, can I count on one hand the number of individuals that I saw present information at the podium related to this issue? And because it is a touchy subject, a hard issue to wrap your head around, I do understand that reservation. But until I got here today, I could not recall 5 individuals that had stepped forward to the mic and said, this is how I feel for or against it. And when I got in today, the reason I couldn't is because something sitting in my mailbox or my inbox today inside the office says that we had a total of 5 people come to this dais and address this issue. So I understand the issues related, but there was no overwhelming information that I saw from the public directly. I was asked did I believe the data that was presented on Nextdoor regarding the yay or nay for this issue. I'm sorry, there are certain areas I look to for trusted information. The Wall Street Journal at times is one of them. Nextdoor is not. And so I would just say, where is our information coming from regarding this issue? I didn't see anyone in support of moving this idea forward, again, reference any of the information that was readily available, made available to the public, or even present that to the public as data. Instead, we're talking about trying to find new data surrounding this issue, which I don't understand. And then lastly, we talked about the financial aspect of it. I'm going to try to shorten this up. A couple of weeks ago, I looked at this number of $300,000 that was presented as a potential or possible tax revenue number. How you peg that, not really sure. It could come from what we've already seen in other states, but as a result, there is no basis for how that looks for us here. On top of that, a few weeks back, I threw out a fictitious, not even a fictitious, a kind of a samplized number of $150,000 just as a best case, worst case, middle ground scenario number. That number has been used to kind of verify numbers that we think possibly, maybe, should, could, would be at some point. And so I'm not sure I agree with the numbers. With that, is it about information that we talked about? I'm not sure. 30 resources delivered by the village. Have they been Were they adequately circulated for or against? Is it about revenue? $3.2 billion, $800 million for the city. If we're saying it's not about revenue, what is it about? Tons of issues here. We can go on about this, but I'm not sure that the points that were made regarding the funding side or even the information side, I'm not sure about that. I'd love to have more discussion on that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gray's right. Staff has provided council with, by my count, there were about 37 studies to suggest that there may be more unknown data that may change my mind at this point is incorrect. I agree that more data is always better if you can get it within the time frame in which you need it. The state has forced us to opt out by the end of the year, and sending this to Plan Commission would have brought us nothing, in my mind, that would have been more useful. It would just be a thumbs up or thumbs down ruling on several of the options, with the scope being strictly limited to land use. I'm a registered nurse. The rule of medicine is first do no harm. The one thing that 4 of us did agree upon last week was that we need to take a step back and take a wait and see approach and do no harm. We decided that our town did not need to be in the first phase rollout of recreational marijuana. That's for fun, marijuana for fun. I understand it will still be legal in Illinois. My choice is not to burden our village with the unknown costs of recreational, not medical marijuana, until we understand if they outweigh the equally unknown benefits at this point. Medical marijuana is already legal in Illinois and in the village and will remain so. We are not talking about something that someone needs to live. We are talking about fun, the price of fun. There are far larger issues on this village docket than this, and wasting staff time and tax dollars chasing after data that 4 of us already agree is unattainable by the state mandated deadline would be irresponsible. I feel comfortable with the decision I have made not to go any further in this quest at this time, and I have been open to revisiting it at some later date. But where I am now, this is still a Schedule I drug. This is a cash-based business because it often can't be in the federal banking system, so that requires some different treatment and in different ways, some different policing, which may now cause us to have to increase officers. It's a give and take situation for fun, and that is where I get stuck. I am comfortable with the wait and see approach, and that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Marge. Rich?
Yeah, Mike Baker, could you open this ordinance item on today's agenda? In particular, I'd like you to scroll down to the section that shows the reading that you supplied us. It was actually a little bit difficult to figure out how many articles were there because there were some 30 blocks, but then within each block there were multiples. So I counted 44. It could be a little bit incorrect, but it's some large number, and if you scroll up, this is what we're talking about. And the reason I'm bringing this up is there have been a lot of people who have sent emails saying that, well, we didn't do any research, we didn't do any study, we didn't have any public meetings. Well, we did have public meetings. We had one on August 20th, September 3rd, September 10th, now it's September 17th. We'll probably have this one again on October 8th. As far as reading material, as Commissioner Jose mentioned, he was on the Plan Commission. There are some times where we spend the weekend reading some 240-page packet. It's not all that unusual on some of the larger things. I don't think since I've been involved as a volunteer and in various boards and commissions, I've read more on one topic in a concentrated area, where like an entire weekend was just taken up reading this, and even this last weekend once again. Regarding peer review, there is the about 3/4 of the way down, the adverse health effects of marijuana use. You can just click on that one. So there are things that impacted me as I did my research between the September 3rd and the September 10th meeting. One really hit me, is that 3 people died in a robbery of a medical marijuana facility. I don't know that that could happen here. And people said, well, you're acting in fear. Well, yeah, that really does cause me some fear. If we did open one of these facilities and we didn't have adequate security, how would we answer that for the cost of maybe $300,000 revenue? Was that $100,000 per head? Is that the value we put on that? And as you scroll down, you'll see the various topics here: risk of addiction, effect on brain development, possible role as a gateway drug, relation to mental illness. I read a lot on mental illness, and I know a reasonable amount about this particular subject and the negative impacts of increased psychosis. The effect on school performance and lifetime achievement, another peer-reviewed study that talked about the developing brain up until about the age of 25 can have a real serious impact on the development of the cognitive brain. In other words, their ability to think reasonably for the rest of their lives. So yeah, it causes me some concern. And the ship has sailed on legal marijuana. January 1, people can smoke as much as they want. They can consume as many edibles as they want. And there's nothing that anyone in this room, even with a badge or a gun, can do to stop that. So that's moving forward. What we did do was say, there's some risks involved in this, and there's some unknowns involved with this. And one of the unknowns is how much tax revenue is it going to bring in? And what are going to be our costs of enforcement, regulation, and monitoring? And would those costs outweigh the tax revenue? And what if it was a situation where we got $150,000 worth of tax revenue, but it was costing us $200,000 or $300,000 a year to police this? So in my thinking, a good way to do this is not be the first one through the door on this issue. I didn't buy the first iPhone, right? I don't buy the first model car that comes out. I let them work the bugs out, and I think the reasonable position we took is that other municipalities will do this. The problem with reading the studies, when you drill down, you'll find out very quickly whichever point you're trying to argue, that comes to the surface, right, for or against. So what my view is, let's not focus on the studies, let's focus on the actual real-world results in communities near Downers Grove. This is not our last opportunity. This is our first opportunity to get licenses. This will not be our last opportunity to get licenses. I think it's particularly reasonable to say, let's wait and see, so then Chief Gillette can go talk to those various other municipalities. What have your issues been? What tax revenue did you raise? What was the increase in addiction amongst teenagers? Those are issues that I think will have a much better feeling after some period of months or maybe even a year or two have passed to see what that reality is. So I'm comfortable with this decision. I'm not saying no forever. I'm saying that we should take a look-see based on what our actual results have been.
Thank you, Rich. Want to jump in?
Sure, I will share some thoughts. First, I have to say I'm a little surprised that there's an assumption, it seems, that because I am not in favor of this, that I am against marijuana. That is not the case. I didn't know that I'd have to go back to my high school and college days to share that I had many friends who have participated. I'm not against cannabis for medicinal use or, frankly, recreational use, should that be what residents choose to do. I believe that keeping an open mind means that our inclinations may change. I went back, I rewatched videos, I looked at the research that we were provided again, listened in those same videos to what my council colleagues had to say. I don't understand why it's so out of the realm to believe that if you're keeping an open mind, that your mind may change. So I'm struggling with that at the moment. You know, on January 1st, cannabis is going to be fully legal in the state of Illinois for adult use. And again, I don't mind. No village ordinance can do anything about that. A resident of Downers Grove is going to be able to possess 30 grams of flower, 5 grams of cannabis concentrate, 500 milligrams of THC-infused edible products. The list goes on. The timeline for cannabis legalization and the start of new businesses is long and comes in separate segments. The application window for the first wave of 75 begins in a few days on October 1st. These licenses will be awarded on May 1st, 2020. On July 1st, 2020, 40 processing, 40 craft growing, and licenses for cannabis transporters will be awarded. The second wave of 110 dispensing, 60 growing, and 60 processing licenses will be awarded on December 21st, 2021. I believe that gives everyone, the council, village staff, village emergency services, the citizens, all of us, time to adjust to what will be our new normal. And the extended timeline of this act provides us with plenty of opportunities to ensure we are fully prepared. In the meantime, it's my expectation that village staff and emergency services are going to continue to plan for the start of adult use on January 1st, 2020. But to me today, this does not mean that we can never discuss this or revisit this in the future. And those are my thoughts, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Craig wants to jump back in here, but I'm going to...
Mayor, I don't want to cut you off.
I'm going to cut in line. I'm not going to repeat anything, or at least I'm going to try not to. This has been a challenging process for all of us, and I know that it's got everybody excited. It's a subject that we've heard certainly from the public, and it reflects what we hear up here, which is that people have pretty strongly held beliefs about this whole subject. What I guess I struggle with, and because we're still in a workshop condition tonight, I'd like to do something a little more than just make a statement. It seems to me that most of the conversation I've heard thus far, and here, and when I say conversation here, as well as the inbound emails that we've gotten, has been still mostly focused on this general premise of use. And what I wish we would be talking more about, or I wish I would like to hear my colleagues weigh in more on, are some of these alternative business opportunities. We have not really talked about, do we think there is we've talked about what the negatives are. Do we think those negatives are enforced, underscored, magnified by some of the other potential activities? For instance, if somebody wanted to be in the business of creating the additive and sell it to another market of people who are baking or making Swedish fish or whatever. We have a list of subjects that we were given initially that had to do with other business opportunities beyond just dispensary or delivery. I'm sorry. Thanks, Marge. I'm trying to talk to you guys, and I got to talk to the mic. And I guess I'm disappointed in the process because I don't feel like we've gone through that very well. We haven't gone through that much here. We haven't gone through that much. We haven't gotten much input on that from the public, and I'm concerned that we're still missing opportunities. At the end of the day, each one of these decisions that we make as a village, almost all of them have some basis of data and some basis of value, and that's what we're doing. The 7 of us are injecting our values into this decision-making process, which is what we're supposed to do. But I feel like, from my vantage point, we have kind of skipped some of those other conversations in lieu of this idea of use or dispensary, retail dispensary kind of stuff. I think, Marge, I heard you pretty clearly not wanting any part of any of it. But I don't think I heard that from the rest of you. Now, maybe if that's the way you feel, that's fine too. But many of the things that we've listed, from potential policing issues to potential cash business issues to potential accessibility, increasing youth consumption, many of these things that we've heard about, I'm struggling to understand the connection between the non-retail aspects of potential zoning and those activities. So I'd welcome more conversation on that. I'm disappointed because of that in the direction that we're headed. But I also understand there's an odd number of us on purpose, so we will make a decision that moves us forward. So between now and the 8th, when we're going to talk about this again, I'd certainly welcome additional input from everybody on that subject. Craig?
Thank you, Mayor. it's actually not a bad segue into some of the things I wanted to touch on. I think it's important to examine some of the statements that have been made, because we hear about being or having an open mind, and yet we don't get the discussion like the mayor just talked about. It seems we're open-minded to everything but the idea of having the Plan Commission hold zoning-related hearings on just things like that, or telling us whether the community thinks that 1,000 feet is too much from a school or a public park, or if it's too little, or if there really is no limit to what our community would like to see, and thus you would end up right back with this discussion. These are the discussions that have to take place in the community, and that the 37 or 38 or 40 or 500 resources that have been provided by staff can't tell us. And that's the communication, that's the conversation that's being stopped. And I think it's important to remember that. Now, it's also been demonstrated that we've got some folks that are fairly closed-minded up here. You might consider me one of them, that's fine. But either there's something that, either nothing can change your mind, or you might have your mind changed if you didn't have a state-imposed deadline and could get more information, but you can't have it both ways. And I don't understand the argument about having fewer concerns about medical marijuana when it is just as illegal from a federal perspective as recreational marijuana. So when you start to deconstruct the arguments we've heard tonight, they fall apart. They collapse under the weight of their own illogic. Thank you, Mayor.
I want to cut this off so everybody wants to continue to jump in. Leslie, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the kind of the licensing, that aspect. I just want to point out that these first round of licenses are going to those that already have a medical marijuana business. The next 110 that Commissioner Wallace mentioned are actually going to be focused on those businesses that have a large proportion of the communities that have been hit harder by the drug war. This is what is called the social justice part of the state bill. According to a lot of professors and folks in the field, suggests that it's kind of one of the more strongly worded bills with regard to some of the other states. And so given our place and being Downers Grove and having a relatively high median income, it tends to be lower income communities. We will likely not qualify for any of those next 110 licenses. So I just want to point out kind of how that state bill works. So it's important to make sure to do a little bit of the legwork on that. So it is likely that if we do choose not to zone this time around, that it probably is not going to be until likely 2022 to 2024 when we could even reconsider this. So whether or not that matters, I just kind of want to throw that out there as part of the bill. I also want to mention that as we talked about, the Plan Commission would also be able to discuss some of those parts of it being a special use. So we had a special use permit earlier. And those are the areas in which we can start to discuss some of the things like additional security if we were concerned, and some other opportunities. So that would have been something that could, again, have also been part of the public conversation had we continued to the Plan Commission. I also want to point out that if we continue those conversations and sent it to the Plan Commission, that would, again, give us even more time than just this last month to receive public feedback. I think it is really important to know that there are a lot of people who are incredibly intimidated by standing at a microphone in front of their whole community. I don't think that we should discount that fear. There are so many people that cannot sit up here and have the conversations that we're having, and I don't take that for granted. And so I want to point out that our mayor council email, from my count, it could be one or two off on either side, because I was trying to make sure I did not count repeats, and we got a few repeats, that we were 67 community members in favor of moving forward with sending it to the Plan Commission, and 15 against. That's a pretty overwhelming majority of the community. And if we're talking about the fact that we do not only want to make decisions based on financial impact, but also about what our community values are and what our community believes, well, right now, we are completely going against what our community has shared with us. And I think, again, we're doing a disservice if we do not take those community members who took the time to reach out to us, knowing that their emails are potentially subject to, being exposed via FOIA rules, and they still reached out to us because it was that important to them that their voice was heard. I fear that their voice was not heard in making this decision. And I think that that's a crucial part that we're missing in some of these conversations as well. Those community members reached out and said that they wanted more information about potential zoning and some of the things that Commissioner Jose discussed. I also want to point out that there was just a recent article that came out in the Journal of Regional Science and Urban Economics. It actually analyzed some of the crime data from Denver between 2013 and 2016, and they actually saw a reduction in crime. Part of that goes back to the social justice portion of the state bill, which is why that was such a large part of it, is that when you're starting to create jobs and opportunities in a community that has been hit hard by whether it be taking time away, having been imprisoned, losing out on wealth over time, and you start to be able to give credence to employ those folks and give priority to those communities that have been hit hard by that, you're actually providing employment opportunities. Of course, as we all know, there's no guarantee that that could potentially happen here. We know that there are risks, but I think it is in our best interest to discuss those risks and discuss the benefits and talk about the nuances, whether it be through the Plan Commission or whatever discussions would happen following a Plan Commission recommendation back here on the council to go through some of that. So in closing, I'm disappointed that we cannot continue to have those conversations.
Anybody else before we open it up?
Yeah, just to hop back in really quickly. Again, I made mention that decisions were made risk versus reward. We talked about that. We're dealing with a number when it comes to potential tax revenue that we cannot put a finger on. We've discussed it in this environment that we really don't know what that number will look like. We have a possible basis, but risk versus reward, I think Rich touched on it a little bit earlier. What if the costs outweigh the revenue? We talked about some other issues a second ago regarding information. If it's not about information, then we move on. We're saying it's not about the financial or the money, but I wanted to point out that last week, as these motions were being presented, there was no discussion being talked about looking at additional options for revenue at that time. Not one. It wasn't presented in a way that said, hey, we'd like to use this time to present other options. There was no start-stop in terms of when we would start this process and move forward. Do we leave it open-ended to just kind of continue to go down this path, even though we have tons of data readily available, not only within the village, but well beyond that? We talked for the first time this evening about a piece of the bill that were in my notes, but it's that social equity piece that the new cannabis law talks about. It's the reason why so many expungements are taking place, and some 700,000 potential expungements for the state of Illinois will come up in the near future. I don't think we're talking about, in my case, a fear of cannabis. I want to reiterate that. I'm not talking about a fear of cannabis or a situation where any of us has we all know someone, if you're not that person yourself. But I would just say that we're checking off the social equity piece that wasn't discussed. No definitive start and stop. Discussions of needing more information weren't discussed last week. No additional information was given in terms of let's expand other opportunities. Let's look at other opportunities outside of dispensaries. 66 moving forward. Via email, 17 against. I don't have the actual number of residents in Downers Grove, but from my previous statistics background in finance, I'm not sure if that represents a potential sample size, and it's not to discount or discredit, but how do we move forward on an issue this big? And then the last thing, again, with all of the issues that the village is currently facing, I'm just kind of, or looking to address one word kind of jumps out that I've heard over the past week, and it's operational capacity. Limited resources to do a lot of things that the village has to do or that are in front of us. And so with that, I'll say, how far do we extend the village's resources going down this road when we have all of these other things to address and do? Again, I want to stop there to give ample opportunity, but that's my final side.
Marge, you want to jump back in?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that for the first time that I can remember, the state is doing something a bit unprecedented in giving us back 2% per capita of their take, which they're good at taking, of the tax dollars that they're going to get. They're going to be refunded among every community, because the state has readily admitted that they expect problems. And this is the first time they've actually given us money. So that makes me take a little bit of a pause, because you got to wonder if they're that worried about it, what are we really in for? We don't know. But here's some money, maybe it'll make it a little bit better, because you're all going to have to deal with it. Another 3% on what we sell in town, I don't know is enough of a factor for me to jump ahead and assume that it won't be, that it would be worth it, and that whatever tax revenue we would get would be worth the expense, or worth the, or that we would come out necessarily ahead. And that's what one would hope when you're making a decision like this. So that's what I have, Mayor.
Let's take some input from the public. Anybody here want to speak on this issue tonight? Come to the podium, let us know your thoughts on it, or ask questions if you have any.
Mary Blanchard, for the second time, not having intended to speak, but learning, strangely, that I have to be here in person so that what I say will be listened to. I find it offensive that the many emails that you received are being discounted by multiple people on the council. And you can bet that I'm going to tell everyone I know that if they want to accomplish anything in this town, they better show up and talk in the microphone. Introverts, will have to find a spokesperson, I guess. It's not okay. It's really not. You have got to be able to accept that in this age of people using email as a common way of engaging, social media as engaging, you've got to be able to take that in and not expect people to be here in person. And people are going to be doing this for fun in our town. And they're just going to buy it somewhere else and do it here. So maybe the state's giving us money back because they're doing the right thing and want to accommodate the fear that there's going to be this uptick. I don't know. It's been legal in Denver, it's been legal, or in Colorado, it's been legal elsewhere. I'm sure there's information on that, but it sounds like we've stopped the discussion about that. There's this, maybe there's going to be an increase in resources and need, but it doesn't sound like we know that for sure. And it sounds like we've stopped that discussion for now. And I just don't understand how that can be the decision that's been made to not continue in an ongoing way to understand more, or to give the public more opportunity to be in person. So, thanks for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in? Please, come up to the microphone. If you come to the microphone, it allows the people at home to hear what's being said as well.
Well, I hope so, because there were things that I couldn't always hear very clearly, so please bear with me. I don't want to repeat something or say something that might be not proper or whatever, but my name is Barbara Pertel, and I am and have been a resident of Downers Grove for a long time. And to be perfectly honest with you, as of last Thursday, that was the first time that I had even heard about this subject taking place in Downers Grove. And it wasn't just me, but I was at a meeting, and there were several other women, and the subject came up, and about 7 of maybe 8 women that were there, none of us knew that there was going to be a meeting. And then on Friday, I was at another facility, and there were mixed women and men, and there were other people there, and I would say out of about 7 people there, there were about 5 of us, I was one of them who at that point knew, did not know about these meetings about marijuana. So based on that, I had heard from someone else that was at one of these meetings that there were very few people in attendance. There were like, I think, 3 people that she mentioned, and I don't know if it was at Downers Grove, because she also mentioned Lyle. So I wasn't sure what facility she was talking about. And so that was disheartening to know that there were only 3 people who were against. And so I will say that I am not for introducing sales facilities of marijuana in Downers Grove. And so I have not had a whole lot of time to do a lot of research and reading, but I've been doing a lot, whatever I can, during a short period of time. And it is very discouraging and frightening to read a lot of the things that I hear. And I think facts and information are very important. And so what I'm feeling personally myself, and I would just like to address the fact that I was not knowing what was taking place with the village meetings. And so I went online last Thursday to try and get information to find out when the next meeting was. And I couldn't find any information on when the next meeting was because I wanted to make sure that I could be here to kind of voice my concerns or thoughts. And then I finally did discover on Friday, I believe it was, or maybe it was Thursday, when the next meeting was going to be. And that wasn't posted online until last Friday. So long story short, I'm feeling, not knowing what's all been taking place prior to these other meetings, is that I was beginning to think that the village was maybe acting too quickly on this matter. And if I did not know about this and other people that I was running into did not know about it, how many other people in Downers Grove did not know? We get information on the phone for various things that happen. Recently, there was a lady, 81 years old, and she was missing. I wonder why they could not have posted something and left a message with people and saying, there's going to be a village council meeting on such and such a day, here's the topic matter. I don't know if other people would show up or not. I don't know. I think sometimes people are afraid to speak up. I know I am. I don't like to be here and voice my opinion. I'm a private, quiet person. But I'm wondering if Downers Grove is acting too quickly on this. And I'm wondering if they have all the information that is necessary to just jump ahead. And just because one town is doing it, does everybody have to do it? And some things were brought up by Rich, and if I understood you correctly, I felt that perhaps some of the things you said were things that I was feeling as to do we have to be first? And understanding that, if I understand correctly, that this is not a done deal if we don't act on it right now today. Is it possible that we have time? And maybe that's what I'm hoping for, is time. And I wanted to know what was the benefit of if this was passed, except taxes. Because it always seems to be everything boils about the money. Always about the money. And then I wonder, is surely that the health and the safety and the well-being of all should be more important than whatever revenue we get back from this. And of course we all don't know the consequences of all of this. The things I read and hear are true statements, I'm sure. We talk about the conditions of what's going to be on the road with people who are using this product. And how is that going to affect us? They talk about the accident increases, and I had the percentage and all of that on here, but I don't really want to go through all of that. I just want to express my feelings about what I think. And then we talk about not having enough information on this and whether we should go ahead or not because we don't. Well, I don't know. Even doctors are saying that they can't even give their patients information because they don't know and they don't have all the information. And a concern of mine is, what if things do get out of hand? What if we suddenly find that the increase in the traffic accidents, fatalities, are really horrible and bad, and things start getting really horrible? What do we do then? Can we backtrack? Do we take any of that stuff away? Where does it go? I don't know. We don't know. We don't have a crystal ball. But then, just as some information, I don't know how important this is, but at least I'd like to get my thoughts out. It said that the THC levels were 4% in 1995, that the THC levels rose to 17% by 2017, it says it hasn't stopped there. It said you can buy sealed bags and pre-rolled joints featuring marijuana strains topping 28% THC and concentrates with 85 to 90%. Well, I don't understand all of that, but it didn't sound good to me. And then I don't know what we're going to feel about this. As an individual, will there be people supposedly not walking down the street smoking marijuana? Is it supposed to be only in your home? So these are things that I really don't know answers to or have the information on, so that's where I'm kind of concerned with my concerns. And then, I feel badly for the children growing up in this day and age to have to deal with all this stuff, and being a parent, how they have to explain this to their children. And somebody recommended a book to me, and I haven't had a chance to read it because it's out of the libraries at this time. And it talked about how to talk to your children about marijuana, blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, there's a little bit, I won't go into that because we mentioned that about the psychosis of it, and then the agitation and all this stuff, the violence and so on and so forth. But I guess basically, if I could, because I really honestly don't know, would it be okay for me to ask you to raise your hands, who of you actually approve of what, for the marijuana to take place, and who disagree? Because I'm not sure at this point that I know, or is that fair for me to ask that?
You know, what would be best would be to
Can I ask
continue to watch the conversation. We're
Okay.
not at the point where we're doing that yet tonight. We will be on October 8th, anticipating.
See, I'll be out of town that day.
What's important to understand is whether a lot of the conversation surrounds what we want to allow from a licensing standpoint here. Many of the things that are a concern to a lot of people, and rightly so, are not sort of in our purview. The states, the questions about is it going to be illegal to walk down the street, for instance, is addressed in the state law. Those are all things that are beyond the control of Downers Grove. There are many elements to this that we probably can't do in the next 4 minutes tonight, but I'd suggest that you go back and read the various things that we've made available online, and if you can come on the 8th, come on the 8th, and also continue to dialogue with us via either email or the phone between now and then. I think we understand your opinion on this. You've made that pretty clear, and I appreciate you taking the time to come up and ask it.
And just one more thing then, if I'm not here because we're out of town on the 8th, we'll be coming back on the 8th, and it'll be too late because the meeting will be over. Am I still allowed to voice my opinions online in an email?
Always.
No matter how many times
Always.
or whatever, if I think of other
Yep.
things?
Absolutely. We
So I
welcome
just-
each one of those inputs, and to your point about not knowing exactly when things are going to be discussed and whether we ought to use our phone system, we pretty intentionally reserve that for kind of emergency situations. We're meeting at the first 3 Tuesdays of every month all year long, and this is a subject that's got a lot of emotions raised here and in the public, but it's only one of many subjects we deal with every week in and week out. And so really, what people have to do is try and stay in touch with our website to know what's coming when. That's really the best process to use. But don't ever hesitate to give us your input. Please don't ever hesitate that.
Well, I appreciate your time, and I just wanted to express my concern as somebody who was against it, and unfortunately, there are not others to express whatever, so thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public, please, come to the podium. Try and not be too repetitive. Thank you.
And my name is Jan Mulqueeny. I'm a resident of Downers Grove. I did not email about this issue in the past, so this is my first speaking about it. I feel like you're being short-sighted. We know exactly how much money this is going to bring in at this point, which is zero, because if the Plan Commission does not move forward, we're talking about bringing in no money. All of the concerns that everyone has raised are outside of the purview of Downers Grove. People will be using recreational marijuana. People will be going to towns nearby where their money will be going to support their tax revenue. We can say the same things about alcohol as we're saying about recreational marijuana. I think that the council is being very short-sighted by not sending this on to the Plan Commission, and again, going beyond just the dispensaries and the other things. I have family that in Colorado who works within the industry that has developed over time. I think that there's a lot of information there that's readily available that would address some concerns. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in? Anybody else on the council want to circle back around before we move on? Oh, you want to come on up, please? Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, I don't really have much to say. I mean, I just came here to say, like, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to go speeding into opting out, I feel like.
Who are you?
Everybody, what?
What's your name?
Andy. And then, I don't know, I just feel like I hear a lot of people always talk about revenue and how we don't have enough money for certain things like that. So, I mean, right now, exactly what was said earlier, right now we're going to be making zero. So, I mean, yeah, maybe we don't know the exact number of how much revenue it's going to be, but I think it's going to be a little bit more than it's going to cost. And also, I don't know, the main reason I came up here at this point was to say, if you're not going to factor in the emails in the discussion or just throw them all out, take that off the page on the website for the village. Don't include the email address. That seems a little bit bizarre to have that communication if it's not going to mean anything. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public before I move back to the council? All right, thank you all. Anyone from the council want to add something to the conversation? Rich?
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussions tonight about the email campaign, so over the last couple of weeks, I'm sorry I didn't take all the notes. This is all in my email address, and if I need to, I can get an exact count. But we were getting dribs and drabs, you know, a few people for, a few people against, and then one morning we wake up, or whenever it was, and then our mailboxes just blew up. So somehow there were some 60 people that woke up one morning and compelled to send an email in, almost all in favor. And some of them were pretty bullying. As a matter of fact, for the people who were voting for us to opt in, I received several threats that, you know, if you vote this way, we'll never vote for you again. I voted for you. I'm really disappointed. I'll never vote for you again. We're watching you. You know, we're going to boot you out of office. This one I found, well, a few I found interesting, and I know that we've eliminated the dupes, but a person whose initials are SP thought it was a great idea to send in 9 emails, as if this was voting for The Voice or American Idol or something like that. There were other people that twice, another person, BS, were her initials, voted twice, another person voted 3 times, as if that would move us. But this one I found particularly moving and compelling. Initials BS. Opt in for legal cannabis sales. Your community needs it. We deserve a tax break. We also deserve to purchase our medicine near our homes. We demand this to happen, and you work for us. So you do what we want, and we want cannabis stores in Downers Grove. And it's kind of funny to me that all of the people who asked us to vote out, not a single one threatened us. Even before, when I was in favor of this, and we're being accused of having a closed mind. Well, I changed my mind. After reading more and after researching and having doubts, and then I was chastised for changing my mind from the dais. So I think waiting is the right thing to do. I think getting actual results will be the proof of this. We don't have to look at any studies. We can see exactly what happens. And that's going to be the way I vote.
Thanks, Rich. Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. Surprised that anybody up here would have a problem with activism or the idea that the voters might hold us accountable. I can remember sitting here not long after what was an incredibly unpopular decision and having someone stand at that podium there and look 2 members of this council in the face and say, we got rid of 3 of you and you 2 are next. We're still here. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. I think that's probably enough for tonight. We're going to talk about this again on October 8th, and at some point, if somebody feels differently, there's opportunities for various motions then. I appreciate everybody's participation and so far, and to the public as well. Let me just remind everybody, both out there in the audience watching at home and my colleagues here, in 2019, we get input a lot of ways. And we should be open to receiving that input. And some of it will be pleasant, and some of it will be not so pleasant. And some of it will come from that podium, and some of it will come from Facebook Messenger, whatever it is. But it's our job to take all that, to take all of it. And some of it we'll find we agree with, and some of it we won't. But suggesting that it's either unimportant because it didn't come a certain way, or that it's unimportant because somebody was animated and it's offensive, those are things we all have to get past. It's part of our job to take all that input. And it'll also come, I think, from walking around and carrying a list. There's a variety of ways we'll get it, but it's important that we take all of it. And we take all of it seriously, and we accept all of it. So with that, let's move on, please, Dave.
Thank you, Mayor. The next three items on tonight's first reading agenda have to do with the creation of an OPEB fund. OPEB is Other Post-Employment Benefits. This is a topic that we've been working on since about 2012. Multiple steps. The idea here is that the village will calculate the amount of subsidy that takes place in providing for retirement benefits, health benefits for our retirees. This is the last set of steps in a multi-year process that would create a fund in which the village would place money that we could use later to provide for and cover the cost of health benefits to retired employees. This is in keeping with recommendations from not only the Government Accounting Standards Board, but the rating agencies who assess our financial condition when we use debt instruments. We do have a presentation prepared tonight if the council is interested in hearing about it from our finance director. If you'd like that, please let me know. Otherwise, we're here to answer any questions.
Do you want to see a presentation on it? Or are we all up to speed? I think it might be good to do just because...
By popular demand, here is our finance director,
Well,
Judy Budney.
the other thing is, Dave, it's not just us, you know. There's those watching here tonight and at home, too. Thanks,
All right.
Judy.
Sure thing, here we go. As Dave said, OPEB, other post-employment benefits, and the benefit that we're talking about is health benefits for retirees. Other, meaning other than pensions. And all municipalities in Illinois are required to provide retired employees access to the employee health benefit program. And while the retirees pay the premium for this coverage, the cost to the village of providing the health benefits to these retirees exceeds that's paid to the village in premiums. This difference creates a liability for the village. The unfunded liability for OPEB is the actuarially calculated difference between the amount paid by the retirees and the amount the village will have to pay to provide the benefits. The rules on OPEB changed about 10 years ago. And at that time, we were recording benefits as they were paid. Accountants have a lot of rules to follow in presenting financial information. They're designed to provide consistent information to third parties like rating agencies. And this particular rule change relates to the recording of the employee cost while they're employed, not when they're paid, just like we do with pensions. So when this rule changed 10 years ago, it started in segments. The first thing that we had to do was start disclosing the information in our footnotes. Then, starting in 2018, we had to start recording the liability in our financial statements. When this rule change first went into effect, as Dave said, we laid out a proactive plan to reduce the liability. We started by making plan design changes. Then in 2012, we reduced the OPEB and funded liability by $7.2 million by using a fully insured Medicare supplement plan to provide health benefits to retirees 65 years and older. And as part of the FY18 budget, we created an OPEB fund and put $300,000 into it. This creation of the trust with a funding policy and investment policy is the last step of the multi-step process and was a priority action item in the LRP. Funding the OPEB trust should reduce the long-term costs. The OPEB trust will allow us to invest in a broader range of assets than we are otherwise allowed to under the state law. So regarding the trust document, staff is proposing that the village establish an irrevocable trust with a Section 115 trust agreement with U.S. Bank that they will serve as trustee for the OPEB assets. The annual fees for this service will be $5,000. U.S. Bank will have custody of the assets and execute investments upon direction from the village staff. Along with the trust document is a funding policy. The purpose of the policy is to state the funding goals and actuarial assumptions to be used for the trust. It was developed working with our actuary, Lauterbach and Amon. The approach recommended by staff is to use a phase-in strategy with a fixed amount invested in the first few years, with the funding of the actuarially determined contribution as the long-term goal. The initial contributions are recommended at $300,000 a year. The last component is the investment policy. It provides objectives, goals, risk tolerance, and investment guidelines for the trust. It covers the permitted investments, targets, and ranges for the asset allocation. The policy proposes an asset allocation of 60-40, at 60% equities, 40% fixed income, with a corridor of 20% on each side of the target so that it accounts for any market shifts. Staff will report the investment performance on a quarterly basis to council. And at this point, I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Judy. Any questions from the council on this?
And not so much a question. I just want to thank staff for bringing this forward. And this is, I think, the absolute perfect way to approach this. And for those that don't know, I kind of live in a similar world professionally for my day job. And recognizing now the liabilities that are only going up and resolving not to pay them on a pay-as-you-go basis is the right thing to do, not just for now, but for the long term. This is, in my mind, a lot like the stormwater utility or like the water rate study that we just approved. Now, we have a level that we need to get to in terms of the benefits that need to be available, the funds that need to be available. And we can start putting money away for it now, or we can wait until later. And it's more effective and efficient to do it now, because we can take these funds, set them aside, and grow them in a way that we can't under the normal strictures that we have. And I hope that this is a pursuit that the village follows long after all of us are gone off of this dais. It's the right thing to do for our employees and for our taxpayers. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Greg. Anyone else? Anybody from the audience want to ask a question or weigh in on this one? It's a pretty exciting subject. Well, certainly
I just one quick comment.
Go ahead, Rich.
I like the fact that it's irrevocable, because then that keeps politicians' hands off of it.
Thanks, Rich. It's a good landing comment. It is a really big deal. One of the things that the village always struggles with is how to fund things long-term and planning to do so. And every time we turn around, we have new obligations that are tougher and tougher to meet. And so, as Greg said, whether it's stormwater or pensions or OPEB or streets, if we kind of set out now to plan to grow our investment, it's just a lot easier than being reactionary. The opportunity for this money to earn money is different and higher with this setup, which is helpful to taxpayers. But ultimately, it also tells those that are looking out for your best interests and the investors' best interests, the rating agencies, that we're serious and diligent about what we're doing. And what that does is saves every resident of Downers Grove money, because your village borrows a lot. We always wish we borrowed less, but the truth is we borrow a lot. And the cost of that borrowing is lower when we consistently demonstrate solid fiduciary responsibility. And this is another step in that direction. So with that, I guess that wraps it up.
I just wanted to say a special thank you, starting with recognizing that this is an incredibly complex set of financial issues, and when Judy speaks and explains it, it is certainly very effective, and we appreciate that. I want to thank everybody on the team who worked on putting these documents together. Judy, Carol Hogan, Robin Leahy, Enza, Don Didier, Mike Baker. There's also a host of others that support that group, including some consultants and a couple of actuaries who put it together. Very proud that we're able to be here at this point for all the reasons that were stated by the council and by Judy. And with that, that ends our first reading tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. There's an attorney's report allegedly.
Yes, allegedly. Thank you, Mayor. 2 items tonight. The first is an ordinance authorizing a special use for 2149, 2151, and 2153 63rd Street to permit an animal boarding facility, and also an ordinance prohibiting adult use cannabis business establishments within the Richmond.
Thank you, Enza.
Thank you.
Council and mayor reports. Let's start on my left as I'm looking right. Kavanaugh?
No reports, Mayor.
Marge?
Oh, the Edwards House Housewalk was a resounding success. They sold over 180 tickets in advance, and well over 200 people actually attended. And thank you to everyone who opened their house. 4 families opened their house and graciously let the public come through and view the houses, and it was absolutely stunning what people have done with their homes, and I want to thank them all for letting us come in and look. Thanks.
Thank you. Right.
No report, Mayor, thank you.
Rich?
2 reports. I also like to thank Friends of the Edwards House. It was delightful, and these houses were beautiful, great condition, and it's wonderful to see those heritage homes being preserved like that. And secondly, a week from today at 6:30 at Emmett's, the Downers Grove Historical Society is hosting This New Old House, where Neil Vogel, a renowned historic preservationist and renovationist, will be speaking. The costs are $15 for non-members, and if someone is a member of the Historical Society, it's free. And dinner will be part of it at no additional charge.
Thanks, Rich. Leslie?
No report, Mayor.
Nicole?
Shocking, but no report, Mayor.
What?
I know.
Not even a weather
That's 2
report?
weeks in a row.
Kind of disappointed. I have no report. We are going to take a 5-minute break. The intention right now is to reconvene in the committee room to discuss some additional long-range planning items. So let's plan on that. 5 minutes next door. Thank you. I don't know if everybody who's watching in the audience and watching on TV remembers the last couple of meetings where I've been concerned that we had subjects that might take us in the regular course of the meeting beyond a comfortable time for anybody. I've indicated at the beginning of those meetings we might punt our committee room activities. This LRP process is, as you see, 6 or more weeks of sort of post-meeting committee conversations like this one. And based on it being 8:40 and based on it being a little bit heightened emotions in the last meeting, this, in my mind, is a subject that deserves everybody's full focus and a little calm time. So what I'm going to ask for tonight, everybody, I'll ask in a moment officially, but I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn. The intention being to pick this discussion, this long-range planning subject of high priority action items up at a future date. So with that,
Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. We will have this conversation. We're just not going to do it tonight. Thanks, guys.